And it's particularly like in the Vaishnava tradition, somebody's glorified. We celebrate the appearance day and the disappearance day of the spiritual master, and it's considered that the disappearance day is even more important because he's already then we can meditate on his achievements. Whereas in Krishna, with the avatars of Krishna, you only celebrate the appearance. They don't celebrate the disappearance. So in any event, the important thing is that on the disappearance day of the spiritual master, we try to glorify him. So I was thinking to myself of all the different glories of Srila Prabhupada. I was asking myself, what would I say would be the most important glory? No, it's okay. I smell it. Most important glory of Srila Prabhupada. And I thought that, for me anyway, what I consider the most important glory of Srila Prabhupada is that Prabhupada was the person who came and gave us knowledge of the truth about life. That's the most, for me, what would be the most significant glory of Srila Prabhupada. And somebody could say, well, that's just your subjective opinion. Well, yeah, it is to a certain extent, but there's two different ways in which one can go about kind of verifying that. One is that you could just practice, you could follow Prabhupada's instructions, and if you follow Prabhupada's instructions somewhat seriously, sincerely, you get a result. You get a result. I mean, you experience what Rupa Goswami is describing, and in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, you go through these different stages. At least speaking for myself, I can honestly say that I've experienced a taste for chanting, not consistently, but I have experienced a taste for chanting, and I've experienced a lot of mystical things happen in the course of doing what I consider mystical things happen in the course of doing my service. So, as far as that goes, as I said, if you engage in devotional service seriously and sincerely, you get a result. Depending upon who we are and how seriously and sincerely we, practice, that result will vary. But is there anybody here who has not experienced any taste for chanting in all their years in Krishna consciousness? Who has experienced a taste for chanting at some point in time? Everybody. Okay, so you got to. Pratyakshevagamam dhamyam. We've direct perception of the self by realization. And we have to, during the dry times, when we're not experiencing that taste, we have to remember and remind ourselves and remind each other and that, hey, just keep going, the taste is there. Okay, so that's one way, and that's the most important way. That's the way that the acharyas recommend we verify that, that this is the truth. But there's another method, just like touching your nose. You can go like that, which is like kind of the direct process of just practicing Krishna consciousness. Or you can go like that. I can't even do it. Most people can. You can touch your nose by going around the back of the head. Who can do that, by the way? Anybody? But that's also bona fide. And that's like, and this is an exercise I kind of go through almost regularly, periodically. By process of elimination, I come to the conclusion that Prabhupada has given us the truth, and I'll explain what I mean. For the last 50 years plus, there's been research about children who remember their past lives, done by scientists. And if you check it out, if you study it, at least for me, it's pretty convincing that these are genuine cases of kids who are remembering their past lives. So that means that, that very much verifies or supports a very important fundamental point of this philosophy, which is that we're something more than just this physical body, and that there's a spiritual essence that continues on from one body to the other. Now let's assume that's true, okay, based upon, just say that this empiric evidence they got it right, these scientists are investigating it, and these are genuine cases of reincarnation. All right, so why is that important? It's not that I'm a lover to talk about reincarnation, but it's important for this reason, that it completely contradicts competing worldviews to Krishna consciousness. One competing worldview to Krishna consciousness is atheism. And basically atheism goes something like this. It goes by different names. Prabhupada referred to it as voidism, but it's just another way of saying atheism. It goes like this, that when you're born, your physical birth is the beginning, right? At some point, consciousness develops, and the development of the embryo or whatever, or the child, and then when you die, that's the end. There's no you before you were born. There's no you after you die. So that's atheism, and that's a fundamental understanding in atheism. But if there's kids who remember their past lives, then by process of elimination, you could just knock that marble off the table, okay? Another competing worldview to Krishna consciousness would be Christianity. Same thing. Christianity, they say that it's appointed for man to die once, and then the judgment. Well, and they're talking about reincarnation. Once again, if reincarnation is something that's happened, then that competing worldview is knocked off the table. Then what are you left with? You're left with, say, Advaita Vedanta school of philosophy, or monism, which says that, there's a soul and we're reincarnating through man. But in Advaita Vedanta, and Prabhupada would talk about this a lot. He wouldn't talk about those first two very much. Well, atheism he would kind of criticize in his preaching, but there's a lot of purports which Prabhupada talks about, presents arguments defeating Advaita Vedanta philosophy or monism. And the basic idea is that we're God. Somehow or another we've been covered by illusion, and when we become free from that covering, again, we're God. And Prabhupada, on many different occasions, in many different ways, he would present, he said, what is this? And there's one anecdote where he's talking to Giriraj Maharaj, and he says, how does God become non-God? Doesn't make any sense. How does God become non-God? How does God become covered by illusion? And how does a living entity that's capable of being covered by illusion become God? So, just on the basis of that logical argument, you can kind of eliminate that competing worldview. And then you're left with Krishna consciousness. Maybe I'm oversimplifying things, but for me, that's what I do. And I keep coming back to the same thing, that Krishna consciousness, as given to us by Srila Prabhupada, is the only show in town. It's the only show in town. It makes from both, from either way. You practice it, and you get the result. If you want to just try to figure it out logically, well, I just gave you my best shot at doing that, and I come to the same conclusion, that if Krishna consciousness has got to be the absolute truth. See? Okay, so what about the fact though that it's hard? We can see that even though we practice it, and sometimes we struggle, and you don't always get results right away. Well, okay, but that's also explained in the philosophy that and I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that point. I'm going to address that. I'm going to answer my question by relating an anecdote to you. One morning I was walking, as I do every morning, around the temple room chanting my rounds. Okay, circumambulating Tulsi Devi. I was just walking, and I was just feeling like, you know what? Just my mind was kind of disturbed. I just need something. I need something to just give me a little bit of inspiration. And I walked over there to that table. I almost consider this mystical. I walked over to the table with a set of Bhagavatams, and there was only one Bhagavatam that didn't have the shrink wrap on it, and it happened to be this fifth canto. So I thought, okay, I already decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over there, and I'm going to pick up a book, and I was glad to see that this one already had the shrink wrap off it. And so I just picked up this fifth canto. Everybody can hear me okay now? Yeah? I picked up the fifth canto, and I said, I'm just going to open it to any page, and I'm going to read something, and hopefully that'll inspire me. And I didn't, I just opened it totally at random, and I opened it to this. And I got to read it to you, okay? It goes here. I read this purport. Everyone in this material world is working like a madman under certain impressions falsely acquired in the material condition. For example, a thief who knows that stealing is not good, and who knows that it is followed with punishment by a king or by God, who has seen that thieves are arrested and punished by the police, nonetheless steals again and again. Nonetheless steals again and again. He is obsessed with the idea that by stealing he will be happy. This is a sign of madness. Despite repeated punishment, the thief cannot give up his stealing habit. Therefore, the punishment is useless. And I read that and I just thought, wow, this is like, Prabhupada's like such a Sparshamani. Sparshamani is a touchstone. that, whatever it touches, it turns into gold. And I was just thinking, like, it's amazing. I just picked any book and I opened it to any page and I found something that was like so meaningful. And this one particular sentence really got me. I felt like this is deep, where Prabhupada goes, he's obsessed with the idea that by stealing he will be happy. And then I kind of elaborated upon that point in my mind, that's actually a description of material life. People are obsessed with the idea that by some sort of sense gratification, here he gives a specific example of stealing, but it could be eating, it could be sex life, it could be working and getting money honestly. Everybody in the material world, the material consciousness, is obsessed with the idea that if I could just successfully perform this particular type of sense gratification, I'll be happy. See? That's material life. That's what's making the world go round. People are obsessed with the idea that if I could just engage in for everybody it's different because we've all got different, psychophysiological makeup according to our karma, but we're obsessed with this idea that if I could just perform this type of sense gratification, just do it right, I'll be happy. But Krishna consciousness is so revolutionary, and it goes back to the same point, that Prabhupada's given us the truth. Prabhupada gave us the truth, and one very fundamental part of that truth is he told us we're something more than just our physical body. So Prabhupada gave us an approach to understanding life and becoming happy based on a different model. And that model is, as I just said, that we're something more than just this physical body. We're actually spiritual beings. See? So he gave us also a radical approach. We, as devotees, we're radical because we're trying to become happy in a way that nobody tries to become happy. And I'll read it to you. I'll explain to you what I mean. And once again, as I said, every morning I'm walking around, here in the temple, I'm chanting my japa. And so one morning, I do this actually more than one morning. A lot of mornings I'm just remembering the Tulsi pranam, where we say, those who circumambulate Tulsi Devi step by step destroy whatever sins they have committed, even the killing of a brahmana. And I'm meditating on that, how, just by walking around Tulsi, you're destroying whatever sins you've committed, even the killing of a brahmana. And I like that, because I like to walk. And I'm thinking, well, I'm getting the benefit of walking. I'm getting the benefit because I'm doing it circumambulating Tulsi Devi. I'm destroying whatever sins I've committed, even the killing of a brahmana. And then I just remember, for some reason, one morning I just remembered something I'd read in the Bhagavad Gita in the 14th chapter. And I'll share this with you. And this is, onto this point of the radical approach that Prabhupada is giving us towards becoming happy. Okay, so it says here, a man in the mode of goodness is not so much affected by material miseries, and he has a sense of advancement in material knowledge. The representative type is the Brahmana, who is supposed to be situated in the mode of goodness. This sense of happiness is due to the understanding that in the mode of goodness, one is more or less free from sinful reactions. Actually, the Vedic literature is said, in the Vedic literature it is said that the mode of goodness means greater knowledge and a greater sense of happiness. So, in other words, Prabhupada is giving us the revolutionary idea that by becoming free from sinful reactions, or by purifying your consciousness, you become happy. See, because people are thinking in the material world, I got to go here, go there to be happy. I got to do this or do that to be happy. I have to have this or have that to be happy. No. Prabhupada's taught us that happiness is the nature of the soul, right? It's eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. And then as we purify our consciousness, you're automatically happy because happiness is there. Follow what I'm saying? So, in other words, as we become free from sinful reactions by engaging in devotional service, automatically we're going to become happy. So it's not that Prabhupada gave us, as I started off by saying, the most important glory for me of Prabhupada is that he gave us the truth. And I don't know where it comes from, but there's some sort of expression, know the truth and it will set you free. That's exactly right. By knowing the truth and then which we got from Prabhupada, and putting it into practice in our life, we become free. Free from what? Free from the miseries of material existence. We purify our consciousness, and we can revive our original nature, which is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. So anyway, that's my appreciation of Srila Prabhupada. I appreciate him as somebody who came and gave us truth. And it's practical, because when you take that truth and you put it into practice in your life, your life changes. Your life gets better, without going any place, without doing anything different, without having anything more or less than what you have now. Just by practicing Krishna consciousness, purifying your consciousness, according to the methods that Prabhupada has prescribed us, our lives get better, we become happier. We gravitate towards, or we approach that platform of eternality, knowledge, and bliss. And it takes time, because it's described in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, happiness in the mode of goodness, it's like poison in the beginning, but then it turns to nectar. So and this is the final point I'm going to make, and then I'm going to stop and let everybody else speak. But we have to be, don't get discouraged. We can't get discouraged. We have to be ready to perform tapasya, because that's the nature. Happiness in the mode of goodness is like poison in the beginning, but it then turns to nectar, and you got to remind yourself of that every day. Most particularly every morning when the alarm goes off and you don't want to get up, you got to get up, and when you got to get into that shower, hopefully a cold shower, and your mind says, no, I don't want to. You got to do it. But that's happiness in the mode of goodness. It's like poison, but you just do it in knowledge that by doing this, I'm advancing, I'm purifying in my consciousness, and then it turns to nectar. Whereas in the next verse in the Bhagavad Gita says, whereas on the contrary, happiness in the mode of passion, it's like nectar initially, but then it turns to poison. You see? So this is what Prabhupada's given us the opportunity, the knowledge, so that we could develop happiness in the mode of goodness, and ultimately, of course, go on from there as a springboard to pure goodness, pure spiritual happiness, and saved us from the repetitious not happiness of trying to be happy in the mode of passion by gratifying our senses. So, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So, would anybody like to speak next? Okay, Bhargava.
So Prabhupada spoke nicely. He understands the books because he distributes them. Prabhupada valued the books so much. I've seen Prabhupada dress the deities in Boston, the little deities in those days, and he handled the deities with such delicate fingers, And when he'd get his books, like I saw it in Africa, he handled the books with the same delicate touch. So he knew that the books were non-different from Krishna. I got to travel with him all over, Europe, India, Africa. I was very fortunate. But most devotees didn't. Most devotees wouldn't have had even an opportunity to be with Prabhupada. Like in Vrindavan, anyone could have easy access. They would just be absorbed in doing their service because we didn't want to disturb Prabhupada. We wanted him to finish his books. And as far as esoteric questions, there weren't that many esoteric questions if you read the books. And the only one who could get away with that was Revadinanda Swami. He was a Mensa guy. He was over 170 IQ. So Prabhupada would indulge him, and he'd ask pretty good questions. Not a lot, but pretty good questions. So the things I got from Prabhupada, for new people, we're on a walk in Paris, and Prabhupada, a devotee told Prabhupada, there's a devotee in New York who wrote and said, well, all the advanced devotees had a lot of personal association, and I feel in order to advance, I need more personal association. Prabhupada said, who is that rascal? He's not chanting his 16 rounds. He didn't say it in a condescending way. And then in a very thoughtful way, he said, all in all, I had maybe 15 days personal association with my Guru Maharaj. He put the emphasis on the books. And I happened to be there when he got some bad news from another GBC, So that's politics, even in religious organizations. And Prabhupada got upset from what he heard. And he said, I give them a little power, and they go, do this, do this, do this. He said, no. He said, first you get them to love you, then they'll do whatever you want. So I was looking at the devotee, I'm thinking, I wonder if he really understood that, or he just thought of it as a great play to control other devotees. Anyway, I had just come to India for the second time, and I was trying to figure out what service to do. So I caught Prabhupada as he was coming off the roof. This was going on when it was getting, just after he got a massage on the roof of Mumbai building there. And I said, Prabhupada, can I ask you a question? And he said, what do you think I am, a question and answer machine, answering questions 24 hours a day? He said, read my books. All the answers are in my books. So that got distributed all over the movement. So Prabhupada used me in that way. It wasn't very pleasant. Getting chastised by Prabhupada was never very pleasant. But it was effective. Other times I asked Prabhupada, I said, I was in London, and I asked Prabhupada, sometimes the guru is not around, and you have a question that's too detailed for the scriptures. What should you do? What should I do? And he said, if you chant Hare Krishna very nicely, all the answers will come from within. Another time, I was feeling really bad. I was very attached to Prabhupada. And the thought that the guru absorbs the karma of a disciple, it kind of depressed me. I mean, I don't mind taking it for my own sinful activities, but I didn't want Prabhupada to do it. So I asked him about it. And he said, Krishna also absorbs. So that brought me a little bit of relief. Prabhupada hooked me, of course, through the books. I got to read the original Bhagavatams, and full of grammatical grammatical errors, but they were so beautiful. And you thought, as you're reading it, you would think, how can God not appreciate the sincerity of the person who wrote this book? It was so beautiful. And then very rarely would Prabhupada tell a pastime. But we were in Geneva, and this couple came. They were reporters, French-speaking reporters, but of course they spoke English. And I was very surprised. And one of them was a woman. She must have been in her mid-30s. And Prabhupada started telling the story of how Krishna ended up with 16,108 wives. And I'm thinking with my logical mind, of all the things to tell people, how did somebody end up with 16,000? Anyway, he told the story, and how these women had been, kidnapped by this demon. And when Krishna killed the demon, they asked Krishna to become Krishna's wives. And then Prabhupada raised his hands and with a big smile, and he said, Krishna said, come on. And that woman was so charmed. It's an outrageous concept, 16,000 wives, right? She was charmed, because you can see a woman like that had been used, and a lot of women are used, a lot of men are used, and very, very charmed by that. She thought, this Krishna is I'm speculating, but she's thinking Krishna is this very chivalrous male, which most women are looking for, this great chivalrous male, this prince who's going to rescue him. And here Krishna was rescuing all these desperate princesses. Anyway, it kind of surprised me. But as far as teachings go, he gave us the books. Sometimes he didn't care about the leaders being leaders. His concept of a manager is somebody who can get other people to do things. So we were in Paris, and a few of the leaders were in Prabhupada's room, and I was there with my camera. And he made us all sit down. He made me put my camera down. And he said, if you don't practice, then all you have is the trouble you went through to get the knowledge. Then he lifted his arm, the sleeve dropped, and he had 3 watches on. So there was a habit of Prabhupada getting gifts of watches. So he would keep the old watch to make sure the new watch would keep good time. That was Prabhupada's intelligence. But he was detached. I think Guru Kripa gave him a Rolex, which he ended up giving away to somebody else. So Prabhupada was pretty detached that way. My own experience, personal experience, where he really hooked me is I had been in the movement for a couple of years, and I finally ended up in London in Bury Place, and I hadn't had really any real personal association other than photograph on the walks and in the temples where he visited Boston and New York before that. And when you're young in your devotion, you feel like your guru is like your father. So you want to get some attention from your father, right? It's very natural. So I was leaving Bury Place Temple in London, going back to which Narnarayan, I was there at one time. Anyway, I wanted a little attention. And so I went up to Prabhupada's room and I opened the door and I said, "Oh, Prabhupada, I'm leaving to go back to work to New York to work on the press." And I expected, a nice courteous nod or something like that. And he said, "You are leaving?" And then he got up and he took his garland and he walked across the room and put his garland on me. And I just fell on, bowed down, fell, and I realized at that moment how an exalted personality he was, and how unexalted I was. So I said, "Prabhupada, I'm just a fool." And he said, "That is good." He said, "You remain a fool all your life." Gave me an instruction I could follow. Right? And he said, "Lord Chaitanya, who is foolish? Do you know what his spiritual master said to him?" And somehow or another I was being controlled. And I said, "Yeah." His spiritual master said he was too foolish to understand Vedanta. He should just chant Hare Krishna. The intimacy was so powerful at that point. I just had to crawl out of the room, because a lot of devotees had this experience where he could see right through you. He can see the impurities in your mind, and it was okay, and he would see right through you, and he would look at you like somebody who has amnesia, spiritual amnesia, and he knew who we were, even though we didn't know who we were. Very strange phenomena. Anyway, I really appreciated his teachings. I was born right after World War II, and my grandparents had lost, who I live with, they had lost relatives in the Holocaust. And most of the stuff on TV in those days there wasn't a lot of dramatic stuff. There was a lot of stuff that were propaganda stuff from World War II, victory at sea, victory in Europe. And you would see a lot of documentaries, and you'd see the horror that went on. And when I was growing up, I came from a Jewish background, and I experienced anti-Semitism. And that was coming out of the Catholic Church, the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. I'm not blaming. There's a lot of nice Catholics in the world. A real devotee is a person of conscience. He knows the goodness of God, and he's not out to diminish others in their devotion. Bhaktivinoda actually said that those who the party feeling and sectarianism are the enemies of devotion, because once you start criticizing on that level, you discourage people in their devotion. And Prabhupada, he was on a walk in Mayapur, and he was ticked at some of the managers, and he said to them, "You come to discourage, and I come to encourage." So that was Prabhupada's mentality. Another Vaishnava once said, he said, someone is floating in the ocean of materialism, and he comes up on the shore of Krishna consciousness, and you push him back in. So one has to be very careful about not offending devotees. Sometimes they take the four regular principles above Vaishnava aparad, which is much more serious, the mad elephant offense, and they'll be committing mad elephant offenses, but be following the four regular principles, and it's a much lower level of consciousness. Some of the other things I asked Prabhupada, I said, sometimes I fight with my god brothers, because is that bad? He said, no, not necessarily. So he was pretty open. And he told Jayatirtha one time, he said, if somebody's doing wrong and you don't say anything, you share in the karma. So he was very encouraging. And one time in New York, Purva was there in those days. So many nice devotees came to serve Prabhupada in New York. Good people from middle class. They weren't all hippies in the beginning of the movement. A lot of them came from good families, middle class families, and they came to serve Prabhupada because a lot of them had mystical experience. And this one woman came, and she was going to do an article. She was a writer. And she had a really nice camera. And she hung out with the devotees, and she went out on Sankirtan. She really liked Sankirtan, the chanting. But she had this really nice Nikon camera, which was top of the line. And it was a very sexy camera. I was a photographer in those days. I wasn't looking at her sexually, but I was looking at that camera. Because our equipment was basically donated equipment. Some nice devotee who had been in the military and served in Japan turned over some nice old Canon cameras. Anyway, she finally wrote her article. But I didn't say anything about the camera to her, taking the camera. But she wrote her article, and she said, yeah, there was one devotee who was more interested in my camera than in me. I didn't think I looked that lustily at the camera, but I didn't think it was me, because we had a few devotees who were taking pictures at the time. And but coming from a Jewish background, I had my guilt. I had to express my guilt. Coming from a Jewish background, I had to express my guilt. Catholics know it too. So when I was in the car with Prabhupada in London, we were coming back. He'd go for his walks in St. James Park near the Buckingham Palace and in Hyde Park. And I said, Prabhupada, sometimes I preach very nicely and sometimes not. I said, if the person's sincere, will they still come to Krishna? It's a pretty obvious answer, but he answered it in a very nice way. He gave the example of the water in the pond, that when the water becomes agitated, then the sand comes up and clouds the water. So the intelligence becomes clouded when the senses are not controlled. So I thought, well, that's a good answer, and it's pretty obvious, and it kind of soothed me. But he went on, and that surprised me. And I didn't know he was seeing into my future when he gave me the rest of the answer. And he said, so there. Let's see, which part came first? Yeah. So he said, so there's two kinds of cities. So one follows the rules and regulations with the aim of pleasing Krishna. And then he said, by the mercy of Krishna, they may become perfect. And then he said, sometimes someone's not able to follow all the rules and regulations of devotional service, but he has an overwhelming desire to perform some great service for Krishna. So by the mercy of Krishna, he may also become perfect. And he gave the example of Lord Clive. Clive went to India as a ship's cabin boy with the British East India Company. And when he got there, he was the clerk, but he got involved in the politics and the military aspects of the British East India Company. And because of his those activities, he brought chunks of India under the control of the British East India Company. And for that, the crown made him a knight. They knighted him. So Clive of India, Lord Clive. You can read up about him in history books. He was very influential in bringing 5 minutes. Okay, I got 5 minutes more. So he was very famous. And he did service too. He brought his wife to Kanchipuram, which is not most of his trading posts were in Calcutta and in Chennai, and he brought his wife to Kanchipuram, to the Vadiraj deity, and he took a necklace off his wife and he offered it to the deity. So even he did some service. Anyway, so I heard that, and I was thinking, why did he give me this story? And later, when I became discouraged with the politics and the inequities of the management of ISKCON after Prabhupada left, I was didn't have any. I loved doing the service I was doing, which was propaganda through the magazine and the books, through my photographs. But I was really discouraged, and a lot of people were very discouraged after Prabhupada left. And then later on, I remembered that instruction, and then I thought, what can I do? And when these prosumer video cameras came out, I thought, I can make that movie that Prabhupada once talked about showing the Indians doing the 9 processes of bhakti. Because the movement was coming under criticism as being a cult, but actually, this is representing the high culture of India. But most people don't know. Most of the sadhus that came from India preached impersonalism, and or they were toying with the knowledge. Like you hold a little tidbit of information in front of somebody. Go, oh, that's great. Can I have more? Can I have more? Sure. So Prabhupada's brilliance was he brought the source literature. He wasn't selling himself. He was giving the source literature. This is what's inspired Indians for thousands of years to love God. And here it is. I'm giving it to you. You don't even have to learn Sanskrit. Here, I'm giving it to you in English. What a beautiful gift. So he was always available if we needed to speak to him. And sometimes he'd get depressed, and I'd go into Prabhupada's room. I wasn't really meant for brahmachari life, but I was a brahmachari for 7 or 8 years. And I would get depressed having to deal with his lusty energy, And Prabhupada would be so kind, and he would sit and he would listen, and he would say, follow the 4 regular principles, chant Hare Krishna, everything will work out. And he was very patient with me in those days. And but he did have a temper. And people sometimes try to paint him as some sort of feelingless, happy person. But he had a temper. When he heard bad news about the devotees, that bad management was hurting devotees and hurting the movement, he felt bad, and he'd get angry sometimes. And he'd also get angry at me for taking pictures at inappropriate times. I love the mudras of his hand movement, but he didn't like camera going off. I'll just tell this one quick story. He didn't like the idea of the camera going off while he was speaking, and he told me, no more cut while I'm speaking. Cut is the sound he made to imitate the flapping mirror in a single lens reflex. Some cameras have a mirror. And he said it disturbed his train of thought. But being full of energy and wanting to capture that, later on we got Leica cameras, which the shutter goes shh instead of cut. So he chastised me again. This time he said no more shh while I'm speaking. He had very refined sense of hearing. It would drive him crazy in Mayapur. The devotees would slam doors. It would like, ugh. And the last time I saw him was with Tarn Kanti Ghosh. Prabhupada was already sick, and this was about 7 months before he passed. Last time I saw him was with Tarn Kanti Ghosh in Mayapur. And he was already sick. And Mayapur, Calcutta, Bengal was under communist government. They didn't like the movement. They wanted, division of land, land to the farmers. And Prabhupada was already sick. And Tarn Kanti Ghosh was the great-grandson or the grandson of a great devotee named Sushir Kumar Ghosh, who was a friend of Bhaktivinoda. He gave Bhaktivinoda the monocle of the 7th Goswami. They were very close friends. And I was just really affected how he came out, and he already looked very gaunt. And he spent time with Tarn Kanti Ghosh. And Tarn said, Swami, I come to get your blessings in the election. Prabhupada said, democracy is no good. Tarn was taken aback, and he said, He said, well, democracy with so many political parties. I said, no, democracy is no good. Prabhupada was a spiritual royalist, although in small units, he liked the panchat, what is it called, panchat something, way of managing villages, where they have village headmen, they all participate. But democracy tends to build power politics, in case you haven't noticed. So, Prabhupada, so Taran Kanti in the end, he went up to Prabhupada and put his head on Prabhupada's lap, and Prabhupada was rubbing his head just like you rub a little kid's head. And that was the last time I saw Prabhupada. I can tell a lot more stories if anybody wants to talk to me at any time, but now I'm getting the big hook.
Thank you, that was nectar.
Thank you for listening.
Bhagavu ki jai, Haribol. Apurva. Yeah. Yeah, Apurva, do you want to speak next? Do you have to get back in the kitchen, or do you want to just, what do you want to do? Oh, okay, go ahead, you speak. If you want to speak, speak now. If you want to wait, wait. Because I know you're doing other service in relation to the occasion, so what do you want to do? Huh? Okay. Okay. Mother Kriya Shakti, maybe you want to... Purva, you ready, Prabhu?